Okay, folks, thanks for joining us this afternoon. This is Kirsten Logan, the training coordinator for COVA. And I'm so happy to be joined by Laura Pulse, who's a librarian with the Justice Research and Statistics Association and the Center for Victim Research. I'll let her explain a little bit more about that to you all. A couple of announcements on my end. You should receive an email close of business today, acknowledging that you attended the webinar today. If you're planning, you should save that for your records. And if you're ever planning to use a webinar for COVA certification, you'll need to save that email and submit it with your packet. If you're watching this later on YouTube, we're glad and we hope you enjoy the information, but please note that archived webinars cannot be used towards COVA's voluntary victim advocacy certification. You might need to whitelist the email domain of logmein.com or go to webinar.com. Secondly, Laura's provided us with 3 handouts today. Go ahead and download those if you need them during the webinar. That's when they're available. However, if something goes wrong and you're not able to do that, you can contact me. I'll put my info in the chat box later and I can get those to you as well. And lastly, before we turn this over to Laura, I just want to mention a couple of upcoming COVA webinars. On May 13th, from 8:30 to 9 in the morning, we have a quick and dirty Q&A about COVA's intern program. If you are in an agency that would like to talk about hosting an intern for next year. On May 21st, I have VRA beginning at 11:30. On May 27th at 11 a.m., we have COVID-19 and crime scene cleanup and safety considerations for in-person interactions with victims. That's already about half full. So hit up our training calendar if you'd like to sign up for that or my e-news. And I just scheduled on June 9th at 11:30 a.m. Anthony Antuna to talk about the VINE program. I don't have that up yet, but again, I can certainly register you if needed. And I just want to do a little pitch that I reached out to Laura to help me on a project I'm working on. And I think as victim advocates, we're used to being the ones that find the information and have the information for folks. And if there's anyone more innately helpful than victim advocates, I think it might be librarians. And while I think I could have found some or a majority of the information on my own, perhaps, it would have taken probably an entire day and a lot of frustration. So Laura was incredibly helpful for me, and just want to encourage folks to utilize her if you can once you learn more about her program. Laura, please. Oh, and I should mention too, if you've got a question, go ahead and type it in the chat box, and I'll go ahead and monitor those and get those to Laura as we can throughout our hour together. Laura, please go ahead.
Okay, thanks for that introduction, Kirsten. Hi, everybody. My name is Laura Pulse. I'm the research librarian on the Center for Victim Research project. I really appreciate you taking the time to join this webinar. I know it's a very stressful time, a lot's unknown, and we've all had so many changes to our work. So I just wanted to take a moment before diving into everything to just take a deep breath together and let it go. Thank you. I know I needed that. So I hope this time together can be a moment to really take the long view and think beyond the immediate crises that we're facing. And today we're going to talk about 3 ways to use research in your practice. Let's see. I'm not sure how to get the slide. There we go. Okay. Thanks. So before diving into everything that CVR offers and how you can use it, I first wanted to address some challenges that there can be in using research in practice. A lot of the time, providers are working with people in crisis, and you need to focus on people right in front of you and those immediate needs. It can be really hard to find time to read research. It's not part of what you're paid for a lot of the time, and research often has a lot of technical, academic, dense lingo, and that can take a lot of focus to really decipher and pull meaning from. Research can sometimes also be behind the times. it does take a lot of time to collect and analyze data. And so a topic that had been pressing at one point, by the time that research article comes out, maybe it's just not as important to the field as it was. And I also wanted to acknowledge that research has harmed communities in the past, especially when researchers don't collaborate to really understand the unique context of survivors' lived experiences and where they're coming from. Sometimes researchers have taken community knowledge, sometimes personal stories, and that information hasn't always come back to the people who own that data and own those stories, people who can make the most use of and really benefit from those findings. So I do like to lay out that context because I know sometimes hearing the word, just even hearing the word research can have a lot of baggage. So recognizing all those challenges, I did want to, of course, talk about how and why research can be beneficial for victim assistance. So I like to think of research as just this organized, thoughtful way to capture what's happening, display trends and outcomes, and be able to really pinpoint what's missing, what are the gaps. Research can really help us to follow up on our educated hunches or hypotheses. We might have a sense of what's going on, and so research can really help us be specific and have not just our own experiences, but bring that together with data and research findings. So it's also really important to have that field perspective. Having victim service practitioners engaged in research can make a huge difference in what that research can do and what it understands. So I have some ways listed there that providers and researchers can work together to improve the research process and make it more useful, make it practical. So that can be from just even coming up with what are the questions that we want to have studied, making sure that participants in the research are protected, that their rights are enforced, and that the whole research process is trauma informed. It's also really important that once that study's been done, like those findings actually make their way back into the field, and victim service providers are essential for making sure those that research is actually getting to where it needs to be. And victim service providers and researchers working together is just central to the Center for Victim Research's vision. And we try to accomplish that vision through a variety of free resources on our website. We're going to be exploring a lot of them today on victimresearch.org. And I'll just be making some suggestions for how you might use those tools in your work. But of course, there's a lot of different ways you could use them at different points. And so before we dive in, Kirsten, if you're able to pull up that first poll, I was really curious just to know about attendees' current use of research. And I have some additional options on the slide there that wouldn't fit into the poll. But if you see something on there that resonates with you, you can type that into the chat. So just basically asking, in the past year, have you used research to keep personally up to date, to inform trainings that you provide, to provide victims with information, to plan new programs or revise existing programs? Have you used research to educate policymakers or funders? Have you used research to guide your outreach approaches? Or have you not used research in the past year? And again, I want to emphasize none of these options, including haven't used research, are any better than the other. I'm hoping this presentation can give you some more new ideas for how you could use research when it makes sense for your work.
Yeah, folks are taking that, and I think haven't used research might be in the next one since we had to, break them out.
Yeah.
And folks can definitely send us any kind of a message in the chat box. So let me go ahead and close this one so we can go back to Laura's screen. And then Laura, do you want me to go ahead and distribute the results now?
Yeah, that'd be great. I'd like that.
Okay. All right, let's try. There can be a little bit of a lag on this, but it looks like they're out and everyone can see it except for Laura. So our results are 43% to keep personally up to date and inform service provision, 43% to inform your trainings or presentations, 14% to plan new programs or revise existing programs, and to educate policy makers or funders as well.
Okay. Oh, I'm so glad to hear people are, using it for keeping it personally up to date, especially now, more conferences are being canceled, so it can be really hard to get that professional development. Great. Thank you, everyone. Okay, so the first way I was going to talk about using research in your practice, it sounds like is very familiar to everyone who's attending, most people who are attending. So first of all, just using research during service provision, so learning and knowledge building. For each of the three ways I'm going to talk about that you can apply research to practice, I included some quotations from practitioners who have found research to benefit their work in some way. And so these quotations are all coming from the CVR podcast, Tell Us About It, Victim Research Combos. And when the slides go out, you can also actually go and listen to the full episodes. I have them linked to there. And I was just going to read these. These are pretty short ones. It was good to have our thoughts about these areas reinforced, like we weren't completely coming out of left field. The research results reinforced what we had already been thinking. And the research really helped ground what we're feeling anecdotally was going on. It actually showed us a dramatic increase in concern about immigration legal issues that we could identify. So if these quotations illustrate, research can help back up what you're already seeing in practice, and you can have just more specifics about what's going on, just identifying specific indicators and measuring like how big of an issue it is. It can feel, you're like, I think I'm seeing this many times a week. So having some kind of research can help you see how often things are occurring. It also can help you get that kind of broader long-term view. Maybe you've noticed a trend in your work and you just want to see if that trend has been studied in other organizations and other contexts. So you can look up research to have specific numbers, and combining that research with your expertise about victims' needs is a really powerful tool. So this slide, I have another discussion question. This one's not a formal poll, so you can either type any thoughts you have in the chat, and I'll ask Kirsten to read some out, or it can just be a point of reflection. So I wish someone would study that. What do you wish you knew or knew more about or had statistics about related to populations you serve, your program, unfilled needs in your community, what are victims' outcomes, etc. So I'll just leave a little minute for people to type their thoughts.
Strangulation, yeah, good one.
Thank you. And I should note too, I'll hope to look at the chat afterwards, and I could send on some suggested searches or resources that I've come across from our library too.
Okay, not seeing any further comments there.
Okay, I'll just let this be something to be considering. And speaking of the CVR Library, this, as a librarian, this is of course the first place that I go when I have questions or when people ask me questions to find research about a specific topic. It can be a good starting place to find something that you're curious about or looking up specific facts. So some benefits to searching this, like over Google, for example, is these resources are going to relate to victim services already. So you can just search in your own words. It doesn't cost your program anything, and you should be able to access the research that you come across. All of this is free to you, and without logging in, you're able to search all the freely available materials that I've already found online and added tags to. So like I said, you can search in your own words. You don't have to think of how the author might have described this topic or how an academic might have described this topic. And you're just able to search in this one place is a good starting point. I also want to emphasize there are some wonderful resource libraries out there that we partner with. We're not the first ones to work on collecting information together. We really want to work with all of these existing projects and add capacity to serve everybody in the field. So a lot of these collections do have research to practice materials. They also have a lot of wonderful best practice guides and other tip sheets. So the Center for Victim Research only focuses on research-based materials, and so you might find some other types of resources in these great organizations. So I do always like to give a plug for them there. And now it's your turn. If you're able in your browser to minimize the presentation and bring up victimresearch.org/library, we're going to just take a crack at doing a search here. Instead of me switching my screen, you can pull it up on your own, and then you'll be able to have the website all there. So for this scavenger hunt, while you're on victimresearch.org, I thought we could start with a really broad search that will help you just get a sense of the kinds of materials that are in there. So if we're curious about finding research related to how prevalent a type of victimization is, we can search. Let me see if I can. Okay. I was going to type into the search box this search, so you can just copy and paste it. But these are just all synonyms for kind of the same concept we're trying to get at. Another benefit of the CVR library is you can use some more advanced search tips too. So you'll see that capitalized "or" between the words, and that's telling the search box that any of those words work for you. So if the article says prevalence, or if it says how many, or if it says number, all of those should work to bring up some results. So once you've typed in that search phrase, if you can type in the chat like how many results you're seeing, and I have a little bonus option too. While you're looking at search results, do you see a way to email yourself an article that interests you? And you can type like what it looks like to you or what it's labeled.
That's pretty daring for the end of the day. That's pretty cool.
I like to have people have the opportunity to try it out for themselves too. So
yeah, I'm always terrified if I'm in a webinar to minimize it or go anywhere else. So we'll see how folks get on.
Okay, great. Yeah, and I'm pulling it up on another laptop I have too. I know it can take a little second to go. Well, to be honest, my website's not loading, so I hope that's not others' experiences as well. I'll take a look at that when I'm back.
Always a challenge, right?
I know. You never know what these databases are working on. So
well, one of our audience members responds that hers also isn't loading. So leave it for right now to have a little bit of a glitch.
Okay, well, that is also good for me to know. I can be testing this all day long and sometimes it just doesn't go through. So thanks for trying that out and for letting me know. I'll investigate. Okay, well, we'll go on to the next portion. I also wanted to let you know, so without logging in, you're still searching more than 1,000 articles, all related to victimization, victim services. And if you register for the library, you can log in and also get access to a lot of great subscription journals. So journals like Trauma, Violence, and Abuse, Violence Against Women, Victims in Violence, School Safety. We have a lot of different journals that we've tried to pick out that would have the most interest for people. So let me know if you have any questions about registering, and then you have access to even a broader world of resources. Also, not only do you have access for searching the library yourself, Kirsten alluded to this when we got started, you're also welcome to reach out to me and ask for help finding things, or what do I suggest searching? You've already searched, you're just not finding what you were expecting, or maybe you don't have time, like Kirsten was saying. You could spend a lot of time searching for these things, but that's what I'm here for. I'm here to search and let you know what I'm finding. So I've listed some examples that people have come to me for. So for example, where did this common factor statistic come from? Like you hear all the time about, for example, like 1 in 4 women experience intimate partner violence. Like where is that research actually coming from? How did they study it? Also, if people are starting to consider other programs that they want to implement or get a sense from research, like if their practices are matching what the best available evidence says, I can look up and see if there have been other studies related to those programs or for serving special populations. And the last one there too about just like finding outreach strategies. So maybe you're considering new partnerships that you want to approach. What are some things you should have in mind when approaching certain kinds of organizations? And finally, somebody was presenting on different psychotherapy interventions for trafficking survivors. So they were just asking for some background on those different interventions. So I of course can't make any policy recommendations or how things should be implemented, but I can at least tell you what the research I'm finding is what's out there, what it seems to be saying. Another way that I've heard of practitioners using research in service provision is actually connecting survivors with additional information. Like knowledge is power. We've heard for a long time, and so research can be really beneficial for sharing like who else has gone through a similar situation. What did those survivors experience? What was most beneficial for them as they were on their recovery process? So really using that knowledge building as a tool for empowerment. And one thing I think is really beautiful in some research papers, I've seen the researchers ask the participants, what advice would you give for future survivors? And I just think that's such a beautiful way for the research participants to share like their expertise and experiences and like see how it might help others in the future, as well as for survivors who are reading it to just see like how other people have recovered. So for example, I've had some practitioners ask, they were working with a survivor of sexual assault who became pregnant. And so this was something that their organization had not faced before. And so they were really curious, what were other survivors who've experienced this? What did they go through? What kind of information can they pass along to the person that they're working with? There was also a trainer who worked a lot of the time with the military and also presented to high schoolers about male sexual assault. And she wanted to just have some additional prevalence information to emphasize that the people in her audience, if they'd experienced assault, they were not alone. And so just having some of those statistics to really back up and emphasize for her audience what's going on. And the final kind of professional development type of tool I wanted to share, CVR last week, we hosted our first virtual journal club. And we're going to host another one in June and another one in August. We're using some online discussions so that you have the opportunity to just add your comments when you have time after you've read the article and just type them out. I know I like to have that time to really reflect and type out what I'm thinking. It can be hard during a webinar to speak up and share things, especially if that webinar is only at a specific time. So we're hoping this online format can help people make more time to participate. And we provide discussion prompts and also tips to help guide your thinking as you're reading about the research and maybe some ways that it might apply to your practice or ways that it doesn't. Like I said in the beginning, it's so important for researchers to hear back from the field and work with practitioners to understand like what research questions matter and what kinds of things they might be missing as well. So our next Journal Club session is June 22nd through 26th. It's open for the discussion's open for the whole week. And the theme is on victims' views about participating in research. So we have a specific article we'll be talking about, and that's on our website too. Okay, so we discussed using research during service provision and for professional development. just building up your knowledge, your team's knowledge, your client's knowledge. And a second way that you could use research in practice is for strategic planning, like what's happening right now, where do we want to go? And this first quotation is from our podcast episode with the California Victim Compensation Board. They conducted a data evaluation project to understand the effectiveness of compensation and the needs of their community. And so I'll read that one. We found out from our survey that some of our processes were burdensome to victims. They internalized the idea that they're neither eligible nor deserve our help. It's really important for agencies to look at their policies and what they cover and who they cover and how they do outreach to ensure that it feels accessible to all populations. And another quotation. With monthly data reports, we're able to see what are the current trends and are we seeing that reflected in the services we're providing? And are there additional gaps in the services? As service providers interfacing with crime victims on a day-to-day basis, sometimes it can be hard to pull out of that. What we see right now is the crisis that crime victims are facing. And so to have that more objective view helps us to do some smarter thinking and planning. So for me, these quotations can demonstrate the importance of what research can add when you're thinking about policy changes or the program choices or how to reach more victims. Research often includes input from victims themselves about what they need. The second quotation just really emphasizing how research can help us get that long view and track the actual needs and how those needs are being met. So sometimes the thing that's happening today feels like a very big issue. And so being able to see, okay, throughout the whole month, was this an issue that has occurred multiple times, or was it because in this very day, it was in the front of my mind? So it felt like the most important thing that we need to be changing and addressing. And I have another discussion reflection question. So you can enter thoughts you have in the chat box or just kind of ponder how your organization approaches these things. And again, research isn't the only answer for updating policies, but it can be one of those valuable tools for informing how those policies can better meet crime victim needs and reviewing the programs that are offered. So we've, one reason for policies existing sometimes is that we've always done it this way. So instead, trying to ask some questions about how does your organization decide which programs or services you offer for clients? And how does your organization update their policies and interventions? How are you staying updated on emerging trends and which services you can offer to meet those trends?
And I'll just take a moment to tell folks that there's a raise hand function, which people can sometimes accidentally click, or I think it's intended as a way of acknowledging a question. But if you do need a question answered or want to chime in, it works better on our end if you're able to type it into the chat box. I don't actually know why they keep that feature on GoToWebinar.
Yeah, I don't know if some webinars people can all chime in. Okay, I'll move on to the next slide. You can just be thinking about this as we talk about some resources for updating your policies or reviewing your policies. So of course, CVR Library. Maybe you don't have time or the resources to take on your own evaluation. So you could use the CVR Library to look up a program evaluation from an organization, from an environment that might be similar to yours. This can really help reduce reinventing the wheel. Maybe somebody else had the same question. And you're able to review the current evidence base for programs and policies. There's, the victim services evidence base is still emerging, still growing. So maybe there's not something specific to the program you want to implement, especially if it's something new that you're learning about, but it can be useful to look up some other similar programs. And again, I'm here to help you look through these resources. I also wanted to point out the Center for Victim Research is producing syntheses about the state of the field on types of victimization that generally have less research. The researchers on our project have reviewed existing studies, best practices from the field, and summarized the same points for these different topics. So they've summarized the prevalence of that type of victimization, what harms victims experience, what services exist, as well as the gaps in services and research. So these reports can provide a really good map of what a victim may be going through, what interventions have demonstrated impact in helping them, what's already available out there, and what is the evidence base for those programs' effectiveness. When you're looking ahead for what your community needs, these research briefs could be a really useful starting point. So currently we have the homicide co-victims, and so people who or loved ones of homicide victims. This includes family, friends, communities, where somebody has suffered a violent death. We also have a research brief available right now on identity theft and fraud victimization. And coming very soon in the next couple months, we have a research brief on elder abuse and a research brief on mass violence and terrorism. So for our second scavenger hunt, if this will not be accessing an outside database, this is all on our website, so you should download. So if you're able to go to this URL, victimresearch.org/research/research syntheses, or if you're just on victimresearch.org, there's a drop-down menu that says research, and you can go to the syntheses that way. So if you're able to navigate to this page, you'll see the two briefs that we currently have available. You can download either one of those, and if you're able to browse through and look for a sentence talking about the current available services for people who've experienced losing a loved one to homicide or who've experienced identity theft and fraud. So you're able to copy and paste anything that stands out to you about available services into the chat. And I'll be doing this on my own computer too. Let's make sure that's at least loading. Okay, got the research synthesis page up. Okay, I was able to download one brief, so I hope that's working for other people out there too. I'll just take a little sip of water. You might also notice on that page we have a couple different formats. So we have the research brief that is a just couple page summary of all of the research and practice evidence that my team members have found, read, summarized. There's also on these pages the webinars that go along with the research briefs, as well as the full synthesis and full bibliography. So if you are, a big research nerd, you can really dig into all of those reports that are available there. I know I love looking at annotated bibliographies and just seeing like, where is that information actually coming from? See, is there gone anything into the chat?
No, not at the moment.
Okay. Well, we'll go on to the next slide. I hope you'll be able to keep that tab open and you can explore on your own as well. Okay. So now we have another poll. So, this is a really interactive time, middle of the afternoon, so at least giving us some focus. So, Kirsten, if you're able to pull up the second poll about what tools.
That should be coming on in a second.
Yeah, it looks like a little time lag in distributing it. Everyone must have just gotten on the internet, but it looks like now we have a couple responses coming in.
Okay, wonderful. And yeah, this is just really, really helpful for my team to know. Like, we are developing tools to address a lot of these questions. Some of them are available, some of them we're still prioritizing what to do next. So this will be really helpful for us to know so we can get those tools out to you. So yeah, I'm really curious about what tools or support would be most helpful for evaluating your services. And I think we might have one extra, on the slide, I might have one extra option than we were able to fit onto the poll.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, I can go ahead and we'll give like 5 more seconds, then I'll close that poll.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, this one is closed. You want to go ahead and share the results now?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. So we have a tie between, for second place, between defining measurable benchmarks and analyzing data. Number one, and this was a choose more than one, 67% exploring how to conduct needs assessment. Yeah, that can be kind of circular. You can hit analysis paralysis with that pretty quickly, I think.
Analysis paralysis, I love it. Great, thank you all for participating in that. I'm excited to show you some of the resources we have because I know we have a lot on needs assessment already too. So this is not a scavenger hunt, but just so you have this URL ready. So we do have some 2-page tools about defining what that type of process is, what are the elements of it, and we even have a couple worksheets as well for you to actually work through with your team, like how you would approach, for example, doing a gap analysis. So these are all available on victimresearch.org/tools-training. It's also from the drop-down menu, that tools and training. So these can help you just understand, okay, what is this research approach actually trying to tell me? So you can find what makes the most sense for what you want to understand. Like, you can get the tool that matches your process. So these can help you just start evaluating your services, assessing needs, and finding out where there might be gaps as well. And like I said, so some that we do have some on needs assessment, and that includes community needs and gap analysis resources as well. And the program evaluation page breaks down a whole bunch of different evaluations that you might undertake, including just, is it even possible for us to do an evaluation right now? So just evaluating if you're ready to evaluate. So a lot of stages there. Also, if you'd like some additional assistance from, not just from a quick poll, but actually talking with one of the researchers at the Center for Victim Research about what you're trying to understand, what you want to study, they're able to talk you through some different methodologies you might use. They can do just kind of this light touch, like quickly looking over any survey questions that you might already have developed, and like, okay, are these questions actually going to capture what I want to know? Maybe you have a specific policy that you're evaluating, and you want to know, like, is this supported by the evidence base that's out there? And I know data analysis was one of the things that a lot of people voted on, wanting to have a tool about that. And so that's another question that our technical assistants can help walk you through. And I know one thing that they are trying to work on is like some simple Excel programs that you can plug in your data and get some nice looking charts to really understand like what's going on in your services. And we have researchers with just a lot of different backgrounds and expertise, so they'll match you with whoever makes the most sense. to talk through what you're trying to study. We have the email there. We also have a contact form on our website that we'll make sure it gets to the right person as well. So if that's easier than copying that email address, we have our contact form too. If you're looking for a more in-depth partnership, like you actually want a researcher to help you go through the research process, the Center for Victim Research also has a researcher directory. It lets you filter by your location or victimization type, special population, or their research expertise. And so all of the people who are in our directory have expressed interest in working with practitioners to study what's important to them. And so that is another scavenger hunt that I hope we're able to work through. We do have researchers who are based in Colorado. We're always looking to add more researchers to this directory. So maybe you've worked with somebody before, you can let them know that they can be found through this directory. So if you're able to go to victimresearch.org/get-connected/find-a-partner, this will bring you to the researcher directory. And again, there's a drop-down menu too, so that can help you. If you don't feel like typing things in. So this one's under the Connect tab, and then Find a Partner. And yeah, I usually like to just start by filtering by state just to see who's available nearby. But of course, there might be, especially now since we can't really meet in person anyway, like you could look and reach out to a researcher in another state, another location as well. So if you're able to use the directory and look up a potential partner, you can type in the chat like which filter you used, or if you didn't, maybe you didn't really see an option that fit what you're curious about, you could type in the chat like a filter that you wish were available too.
And Laura, do you sometimes see folks who will partner with researchers in other states if you're not finding, what meets your needs in Colorado?
I have worked with some people when I've gone to conferences and been talking with service providers. I've used our directory to look up people who've researchers who've studied that issue. So for example, there was a prosecutor who was wanting to study how many child abuse cases were cleared in their state, and so he was trying to work with all these different. He wanted this to be a project that other states could look up their number, like how many child abuse cases had cleared, and through the directory, I was able to find a researcher who had done studies about clearance of child abuse cases before. So I was able to connect them by email, even though they weren't in the same location. They could still talk about strategies that that practitioner could use, like the data they'd need to collect, or how they could build that partnership. So I think it is possible, and sometimes it's just different location, but still the same interests.
Awesome, thanks.
Yeah, and also, if you are nervous about reaching out, I also wanted to let you know if you can let me know who you're interested in talking to. And I've done those kind of introductory emails before too, just here's how this person found you, here's what they're trying to study, here's why we thought you'd be a good match. So I'm happy to connect people that way as well. All right. Going to go to the next slide. We're in the home stretch here. Really appreciate you all sticking with me, even with some search difficulties. So we've talked about using research when you're providing services to deepen your understanding and provide victims with more information. We've talked about using research for strategic planning, reviewing the evidence base for your programs, thinking about your outreach efforts once you've identified those gaps, and effective strategies to reach your community. So a third way that you could use research in your practice is for advocacy. demonstrating your impact and the way you want to go forward. So we have a longer quote here from this perspective about advocacy. We realize how important it is in our advocacy to have research that can lift up what people are seeing in communities. And anecdotes are important in our policy advocacy. I find that stories and the way survivors are impacted is a way to reach policymakers in the heart. But then you need some research to show that it's not just anecdotal, and the research is important as well as the policy recommendations that come after that. Because you can go to policymakers and say, here's a survivor story, and by the way, here's research, but then what? Like, what are the changes we're asking for? And the more that we can know what those asks are and bring that to policymakers, the more effective we can be. And so I love this quotation of just kind of showing all those three parts together. So not just what is the research showing us, what are we experiencing, what are we hearing in practice, but also what do we want to change? Why is this funding so important? What need is this program really filling? How do we want to build it? And so demonstrating that for people who aren't as familiar with the work that we do, it's really important to have all those parts incorporated. So more nonprofits are being asked to demonstrate the effectiveness of their programs, and as there's a lot up in the air about funding with a lot of government budgets, it's just becoming even more important, showing how important our programs are for addressing real community needs and how those programs are adhering to the current evidence base. Like, we know we're doing good work, not only because of what we're seeing with individuals, but we have this evidence base, all these research and statistics to demonstrate that as well. And here I also listed a couple ways that people have reached out to me in the library asking for, like, they know these things to be true, but like, I would like some research, some outside objective observer also showing, here's what the research is showing to back up what my experience is also showing. So having what's an average timeline for trauma recovery, for showing like why these longer funding periods were needed for this program. And a lot of these questions asked in policy circles don't feel very comfortable, or they're not maybe how I would want to conceptualize the impact of victim services, but that might be how a policymaker is thinking. And so being able to use all these tools available to us to speak that same language can be really valuable. People have also asked if as they've been applying to, when they're applying for grants, so finding that research to show in their funding proposals, like, here's what we want to do, and here's why it matters, here's how it helps. So for example, what have victims said they would like to see for more compassionate notifications about crime? And victims have been asked about this before, so instead of reaching out again to more people, you're able to use the knowledge that already exists and include that in funding proposals. Other proposals have asked, for example, like, how often have victims asked for their rights to be enforced? So when you're doing advocacy with policymakers, just being able to demonstrate, here's what the current law is, and here's what we see victims actually being able to make use of those laws, and what could change to make it easier for victims to ask for and enforce their rights. And in a way that CVR is trying, even though CVR cannot take any, we do not take any kind of policy stand or make any recommendations about specific policies. That's really something up to victim service providers and in their communities to decide what's best. We can just help you connect with the research that's out there. But CVR has done funded these small partnerships on the state level, and also on a more local researcher practitioner partnership level, where the researchers and practitioners had a specific question they wanted answered within like a short period of time. So maybe they have been collecting this data that they've not had any time or resources to actually analyze and make use of. or they want to make sure that they're as effective as possible for any of the money that's going out from their compensation programs. And so how do they set up a survey for their grantees to understand what's happening on the ground, and allowing those grantees to answer honestly about what their issues were with some of the policies for using that money, or what they wish they could use the money for because of the local needs that they're seeing. So these small projects were a way to help these local initiatives understand an issue that they're facing and pinpoint ways to actually address it. So many of the partners from these projects are taking what they're finding to policymakers so they can improve victims' experiences and just be as effective as possible with how their funding is being used. And we also had some local level partnerships. Oh, and I should say we funded some additional ones this year, but I wasn't able to add them to the map as well. And these are just a few samples of what people were studying with their partnerships. And I encourage you to go and read the reports from these studies. Like I found it really enlightening what they were able to do with just that short amount of time, and how they were able to just immediately implement what they found as well. They also discussed like how their researcher practitioner partnership works, and that can also be valuable if you're considering reaching out to a researcher and just want to know how have other people done it, what's been effective, how have we made sure that there's been a good foundation for working together. So thank you so much for taking the time to be with me. I hope through this presentation you've learned about some additional tools that can help you find more information and make your case in advocacy. So please reach out with any questions you have. I'm here to help you find the research and other resources that make it possible for you to use research in your practice. I have a lot of different ways to contact us on there, and of course the website we've been exploring all today, victimresearch.org. So if you have any other questions right now too, I'm happy to answer them now or later when we follow up. So thank you.
Awesome, Laura, thanks. We'll give folks a minute to percolate. And speaking of folks funding and evaluation and so forth, if people can, what was it, Laura? If they can just put in the chat box, if they found this useful, or if
Thank you. Yes, thank you for reminding me. Yeah, we also have to fill out like PMT information for grant reporting. And one of the questions they ask, how many people participated in your training and how many people were satisfied. So if you're able to just type in a simple yes, and Kirsten can count those up for me. Yeah, I don't see the chat, so I won't know who said what, but if you're able to just indicate in the chat box if this presentation was useful for you, that'd be great. Thank you.
I was just thinking, Lauren, some of the research that you had sent me, it's kind of tangential to what I was looking at, but we always hear oh my God, it is late in the day. We train law enforcement, and we tell people constantly that responding to domestic violence calls are the most dangerous for law enforcement. And I kind of stumbled across in what you sent me some information suggesting that was true in the 1960s and 70s, but is not necessarily true any longer. And in fact, one of the studies was out of Canada, but it suggested that burglaries are more dangerous to their law enforcement. So, so many ways that you can use this that you might not always think of.
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear the changes
in the chat box. Yeah, and yeah, like don't do the heavy lifting when there's a smart, trained person who can help you with it.
And that's, like you said, these are definitely things you can find and do yourself, but I am here to help. So just save yourself some effort.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, Laura, I'll send you tomorrow the number of participants, and we will, I'll mute myself, but we'll hang around for a couple more minutes in case people have questions and can finish up in the chat box.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, I'm here.